My name is Holly Reynolds. I'm 34 and I've designed 42 houses for other people. The one I had to defend was my own. It was a Friday in September. I drove up to my cabin in Aspen to meet a rental company. I inherited the place from my Aunt Margaret 5 years ago. Every floorboard in that house I sanded by hand. The front door was unlocked when I got there. There was music inside. I walked in. My sister-in-law, Belle, was on the sofa with 3 of her cousins. A $200 bottle of Brunello sat open on the counter. They had been there long enough to be loud about it. Belle looked up. She didn't apologize. She smiled. My mother allowed it. She said, "This house will be hers anyway. What I did next surprised them. What my mother-in-law did next surprised me. And what happened 48 hours later at an engagement party I didn't know was happening surprised every single person in that room. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. We share family conflicts told by the women who lived through them. The kind off-stories that get processed at the kitchen sink, not the dinner table. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done. Subscribe so the next one finds you. Thursday morning, I was in our Denver office reviewing blueprints for a Vail Lodge, a clean, modern build with cedar siding, the kind of project I like because the owners actually know what they want. My phone buzzed. "Mark." "Hey," he said. "Mom asked if you're heading up this weekend." I rolled my pencil between 2 fingers. "Yeah, meeting Atlas Rentals at 10 on Friday. Cool, just letting you know." Just letting me know was a phrase Mark used a lot. After 4 years of marriage, I'd learned it was the family's polite warning system. Information arrived after decisions had already been made. It was rarely a question. I hung up. I sat at my desk. I tried to refocus on the lodge plans. Belle had been engaged for 9 days. Mark's mother, Patricia, had taken over the planning the way she took over anything that involved her youngest. The Whites were flying in from Connecticut. Trevor's parents were finance people according to Patricia, who said it like a credential. She had been mentioning the words "a classy venue" since Sunday brunch. I had not offered the cabin. Patricia had not asked. I had only been to the cabin with Patricia once for Thanksgiving in 2023. She'd spent the entire visit commenting on the drafts coming through the windows and the lack of a proper guest bathroom. I assumed like a fool that meant she didn't want to come back. I texted Mark. "Your mom's not planning anything for the cabin, right?" He took 6 minutes to answer. "I don't think so. I should have noticed those 6 minutes." I didn't. I had a deadline. I had a lodge in Vail. I had a sister-in-law's engagement to congratulate from a distance with a tasteful card and a smaller-than-expected check. 4 years. I had forgotten something simple in the Reynolds family. Just letting you know wasn't always a warning. Sometimes it was a report on a decision already in motion. Aunt Margaret was my mother's older sister. She never married, never had children, and lived in a stone house outside Boulder until she died in the summer of 2021 at 84. She left me the cabin in Aspen. I remember the meeting with her attorney, Carla Voss, in a glass conference room downtown. Carla was 53 then, tall, calm, the kind of lawyer who chose her words like a surgeon chooses scalpels. She slid a leather-bound folder across the table. Margaret was specific. Carla said, "Read the addendum on page 3 when you have a quiet hour." I read it that night. Margaret had written it by hand on cream paper, 2 pages in fountain pen. I still remember the line that mattered. "This cabin is for Holly, for her quiet when she needs it. Any guest under this roof for more than 72 hours or any non-blood relation using it for any event requires her signature." I write this because my own sister-in-law took my house in 1979 with smiles and casseroles. I will not let that happen to my niece. I read it twice. Then I closed the folder. I cried for 10 minutes. I had not known about 1979. Margaret had carried that for 42 years, and the only thing she did with it was build a wall around me before I needed one. That folder lived in the bottom drawer of my desk for 5 years. I had not opened it since the week mark and I got engaged. In the Reynolds family, there was no Aunt Margaret. There was Patricia, who hosted Thursday dinners. There was Walter, who fixed lawnmowers and avoided eye contact. There was Mark, who loved them and loved me and tried mostly to keep both sides happy by saying very little to either. I had filed Margaret's warning under old wounds, not mine. I had been wrong about that for about 3 years. I was about to find out exactly how wrong. Mark and I had talked about the cabin over dinner on Wednesday. Property taxes had gone up again. The roof was due for a recoat. I floated the idea of renting it long-term through the winter, December to April, when we never went up anyway. He liked it. I called Atlas Rentals the next morning and booked a Friday walkthrough. Thursday dinner at Patricia's 6:00 p.m. sharp. Patricia hosted weekly. Walter grilled or roasted whatever the season demanded. Belle came when it suited her. That night, it suited her because the table was the audience she wanted. Patricia served roast chicken and watched me cut the meat for 30 seconds before she spoke. Renting out the cabin, she said. Walter and I were thinking of using it for Christmas. Wouldn't that be lovely? Belle's first Christmas with Trevor. I set my fork down. We're looking at long-term tenants. I'll keep you posted. Of course, she smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. Belle across the table was on her phone under the napkin. Her thumbs moved fast. She did not look up. She did not contribute to the conversation. She was, I realized later, drafting something. Walter passed the bread. Holly, you ever fixed that drainage on the back patio? Last time I was up there in 2023, it pulled. Mark resealed it in May. I said, good. Walter nodded and chewed. Patricia turned to Belle. Did you decide on the venue, sweetie? Belle looked up. She smiled at her mother, not at me. Mom, we talked about it. Don't worry about the venue. Patricia smiled back. Good. Mark missed all of it. He was telling Walter about the new espresso machine. I almost said something. I almost asked what venue, but I didn't. I had 4 years of practice biting that question. I went home and slept badly. Friday morning came too fast. I packed coffee, a folder off rental paperwork, and a granola bar for the drive. Belle had sent 6 text messages from under the table that night. None of them were to Trevor. The drive from Denver to Aspen is 3.5 hours when the road is clear. That Friday morning, it was clear. I left at 6. I had a coffee in the cup holder and Wilco on the speakers and the Subaru on cruise control at 75. I-7 climbed through Glenwood Canyon, where the Colorado River runs green and the road threads between cliffs the color of old paper. Outweighs slowed down in the canyon, not for safety, but because it was the kind of place that asked you to. Margaret had loved that stretch. She'd called it the part where the mountains remember you. I turned off at Glenwood Springs and took 82 south. Aspen sat at the end of that valley like a hand-painted postcard. The cabin was 4 miles past the city limits up a private dirt road that switched back through pines. I knew every pothole on that road by feel. Atlas Rentals was scheduled for 10. I planned to arrive at 9:30, open the windows, sweep the porch, brew a pot of coffee, and meet the rep with a clean handshake. I pulled onto the dirt road at 9:20. Halfway up, I noticed something. The road was wet in patches even though there hadn't been rain. Fresh tire tracks, more than one set. I told myself it was Atlas arriving early. That was the lie I tried first. The cabin came into view through the trees. There were 4 cars in the gravel pad. None of them said Atlas. One of them was Belle's white Audi. I parked. I sat in the driver's seat for 15 seconds with the engine off. I could hear music through the closed windows of the cabin, something poppy. Female vocalist bass turned up. I got out. I walked up the porch steps. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The living room was full of people who did not see me at first. Belle was on Margaret's sage green sofa, the one I had reupholstered myself in 2022. Her feet were on the coffee table, a glass of red wine balanced on the arm. Across from her on the matching love seat sat Patricia's older sister Deanne, 54, in a cashmere wrap. Beside Deanne sat Belle's cousin, Tara, 25, scrolling. On a bar stool at the kitchen island stood a tall blonde man in a navy quarter zip. Trevor, I realized I had only seen him in 2 photos. The $200 Brunel I'd been saving for Mark's birthday sat open on the counter. 3 glasses, one empty. The cork was on the floor. On the dining table sat a printed calendar. I'd never seen it before. It was a 12-month wall calendar, the kind drugstores give away in January. Patricia's handwriting filled the boxes. September, October, November, December had been blocked in red Sharpie. Sunday the 28th had a heart drawn around it and the words Belle plus Trevor engagement. The wooden moose carving Aunt Margaret had bought in Jackson Hole in 1991, the one that lived on the table beside the door, had been moved into the coat closet. I could see one antler sticking out from behind a row of jackets. Belle finally noticed me. She didn't startle. She didn't stand. She smiled. "Oh, Holly, we were just going through some details for the party." Diane raised her wine glass. "Hi, sweetie." Tara did not look up. Trevor put his glass down. "Wait, you weren't expecting us." I looked at him for a second, then I looked at the calendar. Then I looked at the moose carving in the closet, then I looked back at Belle. I counted 4 people. I counted 3 wine glasses. I did not ask why. I kept my voice level. "Belle, who let you in?" She shrugged like the question was beside the point. "Mom gave me the spare key last month. She said you wouldn't mind. I'm asking who gave you permission." Belle laughed. The laugh was short and bright and entirely unbothered. Then she said the line. "My mother allowed it. This house will be hers anyway." Diane nodded. "Patty said it would be ready for the engagement party on Sunday. We're getting the food list together." Tara still didn't look up. Trevor looked at Belle. He was the only person in that room who knew something was off. He did not know what. I walked to the dining table. I looked at the calendar. I took out my phone and photographed it. Patricia had blocked 4 months. Christmas had Belle's name on it. New Year's Eve had Belle's name on it. President's Day weekend had Belle's name on it. I photographed the wine bottle. I photographed the moose carving in the closet. I photographed the 4 wine glasses on the counter. I photographed the cars in the driveway, license plates included, through the kitchen window. Belle finally noticed I was photographing things. "What are you doing?" "Holly, don't be weird about this." I turned to Trevor. "Trevor, hi. We haven't met properly. I'm Mark's wife. This cabin belongs to me. Belle didn't tell you that, did she?" His mouth opened. It closed. He looked at Belle. I picked up my keys and my unopened folder of rental paperwork. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes, I said. I'll let your fiancé explain the rest." I walked out. I did not slam the door. I did not lock it. There was nothing in that house I wanted to protect from them yet. The valuables were across town in a leather folder in the bottom drawer of my desk in Denver, and Belle did not know they existed. I drove down the mountain at exactly the speed limit. I made it to Glenwood Springs before I let myself stop. I pulled into the rest area off I-7, parked, and sat with both hands on the wheel for a full minute. Then I started making calls. First call, Atlas Rentals. "Hi, this is Holly Reynolds. I need to reschedule for next Friday at 10. There's a family situation at the property." The rep was kind. "No problem, Mrs. Reynolds. Should we be aware of anything?" "There are uninvited guests inside. I'm dealing with it. The property will be empty next week." "Got it. We'll see you Friday." Second call, Carla Voss, voicemail. "Carla, it's Holly Reynolds. I need 15 minutes Monday morning at the latest. Sooner if you can. There's a family situation at the cabin. Specifically, my mother-in-law has given my sister-in-law a spare key, and they're hosting an engagement party there Sunday. I have photos. I haven't told my husband yet. I'd like you to walk me through the addendum before I make any moves." "Thank you." I hung up. I sat. The mountains around Glenwood Springs are red sandstone, layered like a torn book. I looked at them and tried to think clearly. I did not call Mark next. I called Patricia. I needed to know what she would say before Mark told her I knew. I needed to hear her voice. Wylish still thought she was winning. Mark, I would handle in person. Patricia, I would handle over the phone where she could not read my face. I put the car in gear. I drove east. I would tell Mark when I got home. I would tell him calmly in our kitchen with the cabinet door closed so the dog wouldn't try to be in the conversation. I was not angry. I had moved past anger somewhere on the dirt road coming down. Anger was for people who didn't have paperwork. Anger was for people whose only weapon was Thervase. I had a leather folder in a desk drawer. I had not opened it in 5 years. I would open it tonight. I called Patricia from the same rest stop 15 minutes later. I wanted a private line and a stable signal. I I rolled my window down. The air smelled like dry pine and diesel. She picked up on the third ring. Holly, sweetheart, how are you, Patty? Did you tell Belle she could use the cabin this weekend? The pause was a quarter second. Long enough. Oh, honey, she said, her voice rounded into the soothing tone she used on Mark when Hugh was a child. She just needed somewhere nice for the engagement. You know how Trevor's family is. We didn't want to bother you with logistics. I'm at the cabin right now, Patty. There are 4 people inside. They're drinking a bottle of wine I was saving for Mark's birthday. There's a calendar on my dining table with your handwriting on it, blocking out 4 months. Another pause, shorter. Holly, dear, it's family. Let's not make this complicated. It is complicated, Patty. It really doesn't have to be. Her voice firmed. Belle is your sister-in-law. The Whites are coming. We're celebrating an engagement. This isn't a hostile takeover. This is a Sunday afternoon. I noticed she had said the word family 3 times in 2 minutes. I had not said it once. Patty, the cabin is in my name. Of course it is, dear. She said it the way you'd agree with a toddler about who owned a crayon. And of course you want what's best for Belle. That's what family does. I waited her out. The silence got uncomfortable. Holly, I'll talk to Mark. Honey, don't blow this out of proportion. Have a good Friday, Patty. I hung up. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat. I started the car. I drove the next 2 hours without music. I rehearsed nothing. There was nothing to rehearse. I would tell Mark the truth. And then I would open the leather folder. And then I would call Carla. Order mattered. Order was the only thing that mattered. I got home at 4:00. Mark was already in the kitchen. He had pulled a beer from the fridge and was staring at it instead of drinking it. Your mom called you. I said, yeah, what did she say? He looked up. He had that expression I'd come to know. The one that meant he'd already had a hard conversation in his head and lost it. She said it was a misunderstanding. She thought you'd be okay with it. I set my bag on the counter. Did she ask me? Pause. She probably assumed, Mark said. She assumed because someone told her she could assume. I kept my voice even. Mark, did you ever tell your mother that the cabin is in my name? He looked at the beer. I told her it was ours. What did ours mean in that sentence? I meant emotionally. And legally, I knew it was yours. Did she ask? She asked once. In 2022, after we got married, she asked when you were going to transfer it into both our names. What did you tell her? I told her it wasn't her business. I closed my eyes for a second. I opened them. Mark, do you know what it isn't her business sounds like to your mother? He shook his head. It sounds like a temporary problem. He set the beer down. He sat at the kitchen table without being asked. He put both hands flat on the wood. Holly, I'm sorry. I don't need sorry yet. I need you to come with me to Carla's office Monday morning. Carla, Aunt Margaret's lawyer, the folder in my desk. He nodded. Mark, the cabin is mine emotionally and legally. Those are the same word for me. They were never 2 different words. Your mother taught you to make them 2 different words. And I let her. That stops now. He nodded again. He did not argue. He did not defend her. For the first time in 4 years, I watched him count along with me. Count what was true and what was kind and what was costing me to keep saying. Patricia came to our house Saturday morning at 10:00 a.m. without warning. She carried a casserole dish wrapped in a dish towel like an apology that wasn't going to apologize. I let her in. Mark stood beside me in the kitchen doorway. He did not take fetish from her. She set it on the counter herself. Then she said, Holly, dear Walter, and I think we should talk. All right, the party is tomorrow. We've already told Pastor Henderson the Whitmore arrive at the Aspen airport at noon. Belle's bridal party is driving up tonight. We have 23 RSVPs. We can't move it now. She paused. She was waiting for me to agree. I said, I want Belle out of the cabin today. Patricia laughed. The laugh was nervous, not amused. Honey, you're being dramatic. It's one weekend. Patty, today she switched tactics. I watched her do it in real time, the way you can watch a magician switch a card. What would Margaret think? She loved her family. I looked at her steadily. Patty, you met Margaret twice. You don't know what she would think. I know what families do for each other. So do I. Patricia turned to Mark. Marky, baby, tell her she's overreacting. Mark looked at the floor. He looked at the casserole. He looked back at his mother. Mom, Holly's not overreacting. Patricia's mouth opened slightly. She had not expected that. 4 years of marriage, and Mark had never sided against her in her presence. He had quietly disagreed in the car on the way home. He had told me in our bed at midnight that I was right. He had never once said it while she was in the room. She recovered fast. Mark, we are talking about your sister's engagement party. We are talking about Trevor's family seeing where you grew up. We are talking about the kind of weekend Belle has been planning for months. I caught the word months. Patty, I said, I'll let Margaret speak for herself Monday morning. I picked up the casserole and put it in the fridge. The conversation was over. Patricia just didn't know it yet. Patricia left at 10:30. She kissed Mark on the cheek on her way out. She did not say goodbye to me. I went to my desk. Mark followed me slowly like he wasn't sure he was allowed. My phone buzzed before I reached the drawer. Belle, hey Holly, please don't make this weird. Mom said it's fine. Trevor's parents land in 2 hours. We have the caterer locked. The flowers come at noon Sunday. Be cool. Okay. I did not answer. I screenshotted the message. I saved it to a folder I had labeled 2 hours ago. Cabin. I had never made that folder before. The icon on my phone looked tidy and dangerous. Mark read the text over my shoulder. He said one word. Belle. I opened Facebook on my laptop. Belle had created a public event 2 days ago. The cover photo was a stock image of an aspen sunset. The title read, Biel and Trevor Engagement Celebration. The location read, The Reynolds Family Mountain Home, Aspen, Colorado. 23 RSVPs had confirmed. The party was scheduled for 1 to 4:00 p.m. Sunday. She had tagged Patricia. She had not tagged me. I screenshotted the event. I screenshotted the guest list. I screenshotted the comment thread where Patricia had written, Can't wait to host the Weitzers at our place. Our place. Mark made a sound behind me. It was small, somewhere between a sigh and a word. He didn't finish. I closed the laptop. I bent down and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. The leather folder was right where I had left it in 2021. Tan calf skin. The corner darkened where Aunt Margaret had handled it. There was a fine layer of dust along the top edge. I had not looked at it in 5 years. I picked it up. It weighed exactly what I remembered. Margaret had chosen the leather for a reason. It was the weight off something you were supposed to take seriously. I set it on the desk. I did not open it yet. I needed Mark to be sitting down for the next part. Mark sat in the chair across from my desk. I sat in mine. I opened the folder. Inside were 3 things: a deed, a trust ledger, and a handwritten letter on cream paper, 2 pages in fountain pen. I pulled out the deed first. I slid it across the desk to Mark. He read it. His finger stopped on the line that said, Holly Reynolds, sole owner. Recorded September 14th, 2021. He nodded slowly. I pulled out the letter next. I read it aloud. My voice was even. This cabin is for Holly, for her quiet when she needs it. Any guest under this roof for more than 72 hours or any non-blood relation using it for any event requires her signature. I write this because my own sister-in-law took my house in 1979 with smiles and casseroles. I will not let that happen to my niece. I set the letter down between us. Mark, your mother wasn't the first. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was rough. Holly, I'm sorry. I told you I don't need sorry yet. I pulled out my phone. I opened the photo of the calendar from the cabin's dining table. I turned the screen toward him. He looked at September. He looked at October. He looked at November and December. He looked at the heart drawn around Sunday the 28th. She didn't borrow the cabin for a weekend. I said she planned 4 months. He stared at the calendar for a full minute. He didn't argue. He didn't defend her. He didn't say she didn't mean it that way. He said, I'll drive you to Carla's first thing Monday. I shook my head. Mark, Sunday is tomorrow. He looked up. The party is tomorrow at 1. The Whitmores land at noon. There will be 23 witnesses. Pastor Henderson will be there. He understood what I was saying before I said it. You want to do it then? I want to do it then. He nodded once. He did not try to talk me out of it. Saturday afternoon turned into Saturday evening. Carla returned my call at 5. Holly, I read your voicemail twice. Walk me through the photos. I told her the 4 cars, the wine, the calendar, the Facebook event, Belle's text, Patricia's casserole. I told her about Mark's. I told her it was ours, and Patricia's this house will be hers anyway. Carla was quiet for 10 seconds. Then she said, What's your timeline? Tomorrow, 1 p.m., 23 witnesses. Holly, that is a strong choice. I want to be clear with you that you are allowed to do this Monday in my office instead with a notice served by a courier. I know you want Sunday. I want Sunday. Tell me why. I thought about it. Because Monday she gets to spin it. Sunday she explains it to the whites while it's happening. Carla made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Okay, I'll draft a notice to vacate tonight. I'll need the Pitkin County Sheriff's Office to serve it on site for legal weight. Do you know anyone over there? Deputy Ray Olson. I worked with him on the Sutter cabin restoration in 2024. Call him tonight. I called Ray at 6 p.m. I gave him the situation in 4 sentences. He said, Holly, send me the deed and the addendum tonight. I'll meet you at 12:45 tomorrow at the cabin. Don't engage with anyone until I get there. I sent the documents. I called the locksmith next. He agreed to come at 3 p.m. Sunday after the party was cleared. Mark watched all of this from the other side of the kitchen island. He was making us scrambled eggs badly, the way made eggs when he didn't know what else to do with his hands. I'll pause here because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I should have called the sheriff Friday. I thought about it, but I wanted Sunday because Sunday she'd have witnesses she couldn't unsee. If this is how you'd handle it, too, drop a comment and subscribe so you don't miss what Sunday actually looked like. Sunday morning, 8 a.m., I dressed in a navy blazer and black slacks. I did not put on lipstick. I was not going to a party. I was going to an eviction. Mark made coffee in silence. He had been awake since 6:00. I had been awake since 5:30. We had not slept well and we had not talked about it. I packed a folder with everything Carla had sent, a notarized copy of the deed, the trust addendum, the 24-hour notice to vacate, and 3 photocopies of each. The leather folder stayed at home. Margaret's letter stayed in my desk. Some things are too personal to bring into a fight with strangers. At 9, I called Carla. She picked up on the first ring. Holly, ground rules. Do not engage on legal arguments at the scene. Let the sheriff read the notice. If anyone asks you a question, you may answer factually. You may not debate motivation. You are not there to win an argument. You are there to retrieve possession of your property. Understood. And Holly, yes, you do not have to feel sorry for any of them. I know. Sometimes my clients need to hear it out loud. I hung up. I sat in the kitchen and drank cold coffee for 30 seconds. Mark came in with the car keys. Are you ready? Yes, he looked at me. I love you, drive. We left the house at 9:15. The drive to Aspen took 3 hours and 50 minutes. We stopped once in Vail for gas and granola bars. Neither of us talked about the cabin during the drive. Mark put on a podcast about the history of bridges. I let it play. I had been afraid for 4 years. I had been afraid of a wedding being awkward. I had been afraid of Mark choosing between his mother and me. I had been afraid of being the difficult daughter-in-law in someone else's family story. Today, I was not afraid of any of those things anymore. I was exactly on time. Carla called back at 11:15 somewhere between Glenwood and Aspen. Holly, one more thing. I want you to understand the legal picture before you walk in. Go ahead. You are the sole owner. There is no co-and-I. There is no rental agreement with Belle. There is no lease written or implied that gives her possession beyond the weekend she was already permitted by Patricia, who has no authority to permit anything. Patricia is not on the deed. Walter is not on the deed. Mark is not on the deed. Correct. In Pitkin County, no tenant rights apply to your sister-in-law because she is not a tenant. She is a guest who overstayed and was never invited by the property owner. The sheriff reads the notice. They have 24 hours to remove personal belongings. If they refuse to leave the premises immediately, the sheriff may eject. You may change the locks today. Patricia will argue. Let her. Pastor Henderson will be there. Then he will hear the notice. Holly, listen. Family understanding isn't a legal term. It is not a defense. Your mother-in-law has spent the last few years operating on a fiction. That fiction will not survive a deed read out loud by a uniformed officer in front of 20 witnesses. Mark glanced over at me from the driver's seat. He was listening. Carla, thank you. Holly, after this, take Mark to dinner. Cheaper than therapy. She hung up. Mark almost laughed. He stopped himself, then let half of it out. It was the first time in a week he had made a sound that wasn't an apology. I leaned my head against the window. The mountains were the color of old paper. Margaret had been right about that. We were 40 out when Mark said quietly, "Holly, I have to tell you something." Okay. In 2022, right after we got married, my mother asked me when you'd transfer the cabin into our joint names. I know you told me yesterday. I didn't tell you the rest. I waited. She asked me 3 more times after that. Once at Christmas 2023. Once when Belle got into law school. Once last June. Each time I said the same thing, I said it wasn't her business. You never told me. No, why? He took a long breath. The kind of breath someone takes before saying something they've been holding for a year. Because if I told you, you would have asked me to tell her clearly. You would have asked me to say the cabin is in your name. Full stop. And not in a way she could pretend not to understand. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to lose my mom. And by not doing that, you lost a piece of me instead. He nodded. He kept his eyes on the road. Mark, sheltering me from the conflict, didn't protect me. It made me invisible to her, to Belle, to everyone at that Thursday dinner table for 4 years. I know that now. I'm not angry. I'm tired. I know. He reached over and put his hand on my knee. He didn't say sorry. He had learned finally that sorry wasn't the word that mattered. I put my hand on top of his. We drove the next 20 without speaking. The silence was different from the morning silence. It was the kind of silence 2 people share after deciding something together. 11:30. We were 90 minutes from the cabin. Patricia called Mark. He hit speakerphone and set the phone on the dashboard. "Marky, baby. Mom, Walter told me Holly is bringing some legal nonsense to the cabin today. Some kind of paperwork. Marky, you need to tell her to stand down." The Whitmore land in 90 minutes. Pastor Henderson is already in the car. Belle is at the cabin in her dress. This is not a moment for whatever your wife thinks she's doing. I did not say anything. Mark glanced at me. I shook my head. Let her talk. Mom, Holly is the legal owner of the cabin. Marky, don't be ridiculous. Family doesn't read contracts, sweetheart. Family takes care of family. There it was. Devastating all by itself. Family doesn't read contracts, sweetheart. Mark looked at the dashboard. He looked at me. Then he looked back at the road and said the calmest thing I have ever heard him say to his mother. "Mom, we're family. We have read the contract. The contract is the reason we're driving up. Mark Reynolds, don't you take that tone with me. I love you, Mom. I'll see you in an hour." He hung up. The silence in the car was different again. It was the silence of a man who had just spoken to his mother as an adult for the first time in his entire life. I did not say, "Good job." I did not say, "I'm proud of you." Those words would have made it small. Instead, I reached over and turned the podcast about bridges back on. We listened to the Brooklyn Bridge for the next 18 minutes. Margaret would have approved of that bridge. We turned onto the dirt road at 12:38. The driveway was full. I counted 8 cars. 3 of them had Connecticut plates. The whites had arrived. I could hear music from inside the cabin. Not the bass-heavy pop from Friday, but something orchestral and tasteful. Someone had been thoughtful about the playlist. Deputy Ray Olson was in his cruiser at the bottom of the drive. He stepped out when he saw us. 45 years old, 62, in full uniform. He shook my hand, he shook Mark's. "Bring the paperwork." I handed him the folder. He flipped through it for 30 seconds. "Deed, trust addendum, notice to vacate." "Clean," he said. "Let's go." I had the leather folder under my arm. I had not planned to bring it. I had picked it up off my desk this morning without thinking. It was the second time in 5 years it had left the drawer. Margaret's letter was inside in the original cream paper in her handwriting. I would not read it aloud today. I would just have it with me. Through the cabin's bay window, I could see the wooden moose carving. Someone had moved it back from the closet. Belle probably trying to make the room right for Trevor's parents. The antlers caught the afternoon light. Ray Olson said, "Holly, you ready?" "Yes, stay 1 step behind me when we go in. Let me speak first." Understood. Mark stayed at my left shoulder. Ray Olson stayed in front. We walked up the gravel path. The porch steps creaked exactly the way they had in 1991 when Margaret first showed them to me. The front door again was unlocked. We stepped inside. The party was in motion. 20 people, maybe more. a long buffet on the dining table. Charcuterie, fig tarts, 3 bottles of champagne and ice. A banner with B&T in gold script hung above the fireplace. The fireplace I had repointed myself 2 summers ago. The music stopped within 3 seconds, not because someone turned it off, but because the people closest to the door noticed the uniform first, and then no one was listening to the music anymore. Patricia was in the center of the room in a cream-wrapped dress and pearls. She turned toward us with a glass of champagne halfway to her mouth. "Holly, what is this?" The room went quiet enough to hear the ice settling in the bucket. Belle was beside the fireplace in a white cocktail dress. Trevor was a step behind her holding a champagne flute. Trevor's parents, a tall man with silver hair, a small woman with a navy handbag, stood by the bay window. Pastor Henderson sat on the sofa, untouched glass of soda water on the side table. Walter was by the back window looking out at nothing. Diane and Tara were near the kitchen island. Belle's college friends, 6 of them, formed a loose half-circle behind her. I said, "Patty, this is Deputy Olson, Pitkin County Sheriff's Office." Patricia did not move. Her glass did not lower. Her face did several small things in succession, none of which she could control. Bella stepped forward. "Mom, what?" "Holly, you can't." I did not answer her. I stood 1 step behind Deputy Olson. I did not need to speak. The deed was about to. Patricia did the thing she always did when she felt the ground move. She turned to Mark. Marky, baby, tell her to stop this." Mark did not move toward her. 5 seconds passed. I counted them. Trevor's parents counted them, too. I could see Mrs. Whitmore's lips part slightly, as if she were about to ask her husband something, but decide not to. Then Mark said clearly enough for the back of the room to hear, "Mom, Holly is right." Patricia's voice cracked. "Excuse me, she's the owner." I should have said that out loud a long time ago. Belle made a sound that was halfway to a sob. "This is my engagement." I looked at Trevor for the first time. He had been watching his fiancée. Now he was watching me. His parents had moved 1/2 step closer to each other. Mrs. Whitmore's hand was on the strap of her navy bag. Trevor leaned over to his father. He whispered something I couldn't hear. His father nodded once. Pastor Henderson set his soda water down on the side table. He stood up. He did not speak. He just stood slowly. The way a man stands when he has decided to be a witness instead of a participant. Walter at the back of the room did not turn around from the window. Deputy Olson cleared his throat. He took the folder from my hand. He opened it. The paper made the small, dry sound that important paper makes when it is unfolded in arum that has stopped talking. I took 1 breath in, 1 breath out. I was exactly calm. This part I had been waiting for since I was 29. I'll pause again because what happened in the next 60 seconds when Deputy Olson opened that folder and started reading. It is the part I replay in my head when I'm tempted to keep the peace at my own expense. If you've ever held a folder you didn't open for too long, this part is for you. Comment. I would have opened it and let me know. Deputy Olson cleared his throat a second time. He read in a flat, professional voice, the voice he used at scenes, the voice that did not editorialize. "This is a notice to vacate. Served Sunday, September 28th by the office of the Pitkin County Sheriff to Patricia Reynolds, to Belle Reynolds, to Diane Reynolds, to Tara Reynolds, to any guests of the above. The property located at," he read the address, "is owned solely by Holly Reynolds, recorded September 14th, 2021. All occupants who entered this property without the express written permission of the owner are required to remove personal belongings and vacate the premises within 60 minutes of this notice. Failure to comply may result in police escort or charges of criminal trespass under Colorado Revised Statute 18453. Patricia opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I looked for 1 second at the calendar still sitting on the dining table, the one with her handwriting blocking out 4 months. It was still there, exactly as I had photographed it Friday morning. Belle had not thought to put it away. I looked at Pastor Henderson. He nodded at me once. Slowly, he was not on Patricia's side. He was on the side of the deed. Deputy Olson lowered the page. Patricia found her voice. "This is absurd. We are family." The Whites have flown in for this. Pastor Henderson is here. We've planned. Pastor Henderson said quietly, Patty, maybe we should listen. Patricia turned toward him as if she had been slapped. He did not look away. He did not soften. He had spent 40 years pastoring her congregation, and he knew the difference between a misunderstanding and a deed. That was the first crack. Belle said, Trev, baby, do something. Trevor turned to her. He did not raise his voice. He spoke at exactly the volume of someone asking a serious question for the first time. Belle, did you tell me this cabin was yours? The room held its breath. Belle's mouth opened. It closed. It opened again. Trev, it's complicated. Did you tell me this cabin was yours? My mom said. Trevor's father took half a step forward. His mother put a hand on his arm. The Whitesers were not interested in becoming part of a family fight. They were interested in finding out in the next 60 seconds exactly what kind of family they were marrying into. Diane reached for her handbag. She did not look at Patricia. She walked to the door and stepped onto the porch without saying goodbye. Tara followed her, eyes still half on her phone, the rest of her face wishing she had not come. I had not said one word since Deputy Olson started reading. I did not need to. The deed had spoken. The notice had spoken. Pastor Henderson had spoken. Mark had spoken. I stood with my leather folder under my arm and watched it work. Patricia stepped toward me. Her cream-wrap dress made a small sound. Her pearls clicked against the buttons. 4 years. Her voice was loud now. Loud the way a glass is loud just before it breaks. For years I welcomed you into my family. I brought you casseroles. I sat through your work dinners. I introduced you at church as my daughter-in-law. And this is what you do to me. I did not answer. In front of Pastor Henderson, in front of the Whitmore, Holly Reynolds, you have humiliated my daughter on the most important day of her life. I did not answer. I walked slowly to where Trevor stood. I held out a folded photocopy of the deed. He took it. He unfolded it. He read. Belle saw what was happening. Her face changed. My mother said this house would be mine anyway. It came out as a shout. It came out as confession. Patricia turned on her. Her face went white in 3 places. Temples, chin, and the corners of her mouth. She looked for a half second like she might slap her own daughter. I said evenly, Biel, your mother said. Your mother didn't sign. Belle's breath hitched. She did not have an answer for that. Trevor handed the deed back to me without comment. He took one careful step away from her, half a foot of polished oak floor, and looked instead at his mother. Mrs. Whitmore's expression had not changed. That was its own kind of expression. Mark stayed at my shoulder. He did not gloat. He did not lecture. He just stood there with me in the right place. Finally, Trevor folded the deed neatly along its existing creases. He set it down on the dining table beside the calendar he had not yet noticed. Then he turned to Belle. Belle, last Tuesday at dinner, you told me your parents built this cabin. You said your father's people had owned this land since the 70s. You told me your mother had restored the kitchen. Belle's eyes welled. Trev, I asked you twice. You told me twice. Trev, my mom said it was the family cabin. Your mom said you didn't ask. There it was, the clean question. Trevor was a kinder man than I had expected. He was also, I realized, a careful one. Investment associates ask careful questions. Mr. Whitmore stepped forward and put a quiet hand on his son's shoulder. Trevor, why don't we step outside for a few minutes? Trevor nodded. He did not look at Belle. He walked out with his parents. The screen door clicked shut behind them. Pastor Henderson followed 3 minutes later. He paused at the door. Holly, he said, I'm sorry it came to this. You did right by your aunt. He left. Belle's 6 college friends began quietly retrieving their handbags. None of them met Patricia's eyes. None of them said goodbye. Within 4 minutes, the cabin held only Holly, Mark, Patricia, Walter, Belle, and Deputy Olson. Walter finally turned from the back window. He looked at his daughter, who was crying, and Athai's wife, who was not. He said, Patty, we should go. It was the first thing he had said all afternoon. It was the kindest sentence he had ever said in my direction. Belle turned on me. The tears were real. The grievance was not Holly. Please, please, Trevor is going to call off the engagement. His parents, they'll never look at me the same. Please make it stop. Belle, you put your engagement party in my house without asking. That was your decision. Mom told me. You're 26. She sobbed. Mom said it was fine. Patricia reached for her. Belle shoved her mother's hand away with her shoulder. She did it without looking. It was the body language of someone who had been let down by that hand many times. You said, Belle was almost screaming now. You said the cabin would be mine. You said Holly wouldn't mind. You said she was just my brother's wife. The room got very quiet, just my brother's wife. Patricia closed her mouth. I did not say anything. The silence said what I would have said. Mark put his hand on the small of my back, not for comfort, for witness. So I would feel in my body that he was standing exactly where he should have been standing for 4 years. Deputy Olson cleared his throat. Ma'am, the 60 minutes started when I read the notice. You have approximately 51 minutes remaining. I suggest you begin collecting personal items. Belle wiped her face. She walked unsteady toward the back hallway where she had stashed her overnight bag. Patricia followed her slower, like a woman who had finally noticed that her daughter was angry at her wrong person. Walter began collecting the champagne flutes from the dining table. His hands were steady. He set them in the sink one by themselves. Patricia did not go to help Belle pack. She sat down instead on the sage green sofa I had reupholstered in 2022. She set her glass of champagne on the coffee table beside Belle's. The 2 glasses were almost identical. Mark and I stayed by the dining table. Deputy Olson stayed by the door. Patricia did not look at me when she finally spoke. She looked at her own hands. I lost my house in 1993. Mark glanced at her, then at me. Your father and I, my first husband. When we divorced, I lost the house. My grandmother had built it. It was on Lake Michigan. I thought it would always be mine. I learned that year that things you think are yours can be taken away by people who carry the paperwork. I did not move. I didn't want that for Belle. For 2 seconds, the room was very still. 2 seconds were all I would give her. Then she looked up. Her eyes were dry, her jaw set. But you should have understood, Holly. You should have known that family doesn't do this to family. You should have known I was trying to take care of my own. I waited until I was sure my voice was level. Patty, I understood you perfectly. That's why I had the sheriff read the deed instead of reading it myself. Mark watched her face. Whatever he had hoped he might see, the apology, the crack, did not come. The story about 1993 had been a story. The lesson she had taken from it was not the one I would have taken. She stood up. She smoothed her dress. She walked without looking at me toward the back hallway to find her daughter. By 3:15, the cabin was empty of Reynolds' women who had not been invited. Belle had taken a bag of dresses and a curling iron. Patricia had taken a casserole dish and what was left of her composure. Walter had taken nothing. Trevor and his parents had driven back to Aspen to talk over dinner. Pastor Henderson had texted Mark an hour later asking if Holly was all right. The locksmith arrived at 3:30. He changed the front door lock and the back door lock. He gave me 3 new keys. I put one on my ring, one in Mark's jacket pocket, and one in the leather folder. I took the wooden moose carving back from the side table where Belle had moved it for the party. I put it back in its original spot on the table beside the front door. Margaret had bought it in Jackson Hole in 1991, and Margaret had decided where it lived. The cabin was quiet for the first time in 3 days. Deputy Olson shook my hand at the door. He said, "Done," I said, "Thank you." It was the right word and the only word. Mark and I drove down the mountain at sunset. The light through Glenwood Canyon turned the red sandstone pink, then plum, then dark. He kept both hands on the wheel. 20 minutes outside Aspen, he said. You were right. Sheltering you from the conflict didn't protect you. It made you invisible. I don't need sorry, Mark. I know, I'm not saying sorry. I'm saying I needed to change then change. He nodded. He kept driving. We did not turn the radio on. Some silences are full enough to be the conversation. I held the leather folder on my lap. Margaret's letter was still inside in cream paper in fountain pen. I had not needed to read it aloud today. The deed had done the talking. The letter was just for me. I traced a fingertip along the worn corner. 5 years of bottom drawer dust was gone finally from a folder Margaret had given me before I knew I would ever need it. It was the heaviest light thing I had ever held. 2 weeks later, Belle and Trevor are still engaged. The wedding has been moved to a small venue in Boulder. 12 guests a Saturday afternoon in spring. The Witters will attend. Patricia will too, in a smaller dress and a quieter role. Belle deleted the Facebook event the morning after Sunday. She did not announce why. The Reynolds family mountain home is no longer mentioned on her page. Patricia has not called me. Walter called once, asking if Mark and I would come to Thursday dinner. Mark told him gently. We would be back to Dinnerson a different schedule. The cabin is rented through April. The tenants are a quiet couple, both veterinarians with one elderly border collie. They sent me a photo of the dog asleep in front of the fireplace last Tuesday. They thanked me for the moose carving. The leather folder sits on the top shelf of my office behind glass, where it can be seen, but not borrowed. Margaret would approve of that placement. The dust I sweep myself once a month. Mark and I started therapy on a Tuesday morning. The therapist was a woman in her 60s named Dr. Levy, who took notes by hand on yellow legal pads. She asked on the first session, "What's the rule going forward?" I said, 12 months. Patricia does not enter the cabin. We don't discuss the cabin at family dinners unless Mark brings it up. After 12 months, we revisit. Mark said, agreed. Dr. Livy wrote it down. She asked, and Thursday dinners. I said, every other week I pick the time. Mark nodded. Dr. Libby looked at us both. She said, you two are the easiest couple I've had this month. Mark laughed. A real laugh, the first one in weeks. I let myself smile. The boundary was not a wall. It was an address. From now on, the Reynolds family would have to send anything important to mine. Aunt Margaret wrote a line in that addendum I did not understand when I was 29, but I understand now at 34. Your signature is not a stroke of ink. It is the only thing standing between your life and the people who believe they have a claim on it. That's my story. 4 years of silence, one folder I should have opened sooner, and a Sunday in Aspen I'll remember every time I lock a door. If this reminded you of a paper you haven't filed, go check tonight. Drop a comment, hit subscribe. See you next time.